John Donaldson was a young man when they left Canada's province to come to Franklin County, Virginia, and settle in. John Donaldson became the governor of Virginia from 1774 through 1776. He had a family that was growing. His 10th daughter he named after his wife, Rachel, who later became famous for settling in, as John was the co-founder of Fort Nashville, turning it into Country Music City, Nashville, Tennessee, in 1780. As Rachel grew, she ran into a man she referred to as Andy. She had moved, had a failed marriage with Lewis Roberts, in southern Kentucky, and came back to Fort Nashville to marry the ever-growing popular Old Hickory, 7th President of the United States, Andrew Jackson. As Andrew and Rachel's marriage grew, they began to build a house, a home, and it's hard to really say when he found time to have it built. But they built the Hermitage in Tennessee for Rachel in 1821. And by then, Andrew Jackson had already become a general. He had already won the Battle of 1812 in Louisiana. He had inspired the Louisiana Purchase from the English who he hated so, and had to fight once again as he went from the Hermitage and Nashville, Tennessee, to the state of Florida, which was a Spanish province at that time. And he went down to settle it for the United States, bringing it into the United States of America. And as he did, King George, I believe it was, said to man to instigate or aggravate the efforts of Andrew Jackson. And he had him detained and arrested, sent him to court with others. The others were executed, but because of his stature in England, they dismissed all the charges against the man who aggravated him so. And Andrew went to court on the final day, walked him outside, and shot him, much to the chagrin of the President, Monroe, and the judge. They didn't really know what to do with Old Hickory, and they did nothing. He took his troops and continued on through Florida until it was settled, and it was his, and he was the first mayor of Florida. They were all under his command, and he brought them into the United States of America as a state. Went back to Nashville, to the Hermitage, and was elected president. All the stresses from the campaigns of Adams, combined with the, I'm sure, loneliness of a wife whose husband had become such a great leader, she succumbed to her despair the week before he became president. It was as though she wished when she said she would rather stay in Hermitage and be a gatekeeper than to ever live in that palace in Washington. God must have heard her and took her home. It broke President Jackson's heart. They said he was bellowing, kneeled by her body as she was taken from him. But he had to collect himself for the United States of America, for they depended on him so. And as he did, his niece, Emily Donaldson, stepped up and became the first president, or the first lady to the president in Washington, D.C. from 1829 until 1834, and served him well. They had an argument about his uh, friendships with some females, and she left and went back to Hermitage. Sarah Yorkie took over, and she was his first lady from 1834 until 1837, and his presidency ended. He went back to Tennessee, participated in legislature, and did a lot for the United States of America even after he left office. But Andrew Jackson died 1845. This country lost its founder of democracy, if you will, being that he was the first of so many things in the United States. The first Democratic president, the first Democrat, period, the first mayor of Florida, the first to the fight in New Orleans, conquering everywhere he went. He was born to parents who died due to the hands of the British in the Revolutionary Wars. He fought against Indians. He fought against the English. He fought against the Spanish. He fought against the North and died right before the Civil War. He wanted to see his way of life, which was a mixture of the Indian lessons that he had learned, lessons he had learned from trusting English once before, and of course the philosophies of the serf landlord, aristocratic land ownerships that were taught to so many of them by their parents back in those times. Slaves came along, helped on the farms. Uh, some of the farms were nice, peaceful farms to work at, be at. And Andrew Jackson's best friend, one of them, was his slave or his worker, who loved him so that he chose to be buried by President Jackson in Hermitage. When the emancipation came through, he wanted to stay and stay aboard Jackson's plantation called Hermitage. There are some great, interesting stories about President Jackson and my family, the Donaldsons, and not the least of which was the co-founder of Crab Orchard, Tennessee, who developed relationships in that little town. His name was Stockley Donaldson. He had 4 children, Samuel, Jennifer, Thomas, and Robert. And I'm sure one of them was the grandpa or grandma of my grandfather, which is James Donaldson, who's in Glendale at the Oak Hills Cemetery, buried next to my grandma, Frances Smith Donaldson. Their story and much more can be found on Rodcast at YouTube. And I have many more stories myself because I am not only a Donaldson and Smith, but I'm also a Ham and Brown. So I shared stories about my times at the cemetery. I shared stories about my twisted perspective because my family is so diverse. We are every color. We are every gender. We are every single thing in America. I think every single stitch of the flag is stitched in some way, shape, or form from my family's fingerprints, much like yours. I want to thank you for listening. I know I carry on some. I have many stories, and I like to keep them on here as sort of a video dialogue between me and future generations of my family, so that grandchildren I may never know, or great-grandchildren I may never know, can sit down and learn about Uncle Dunkle and all the secrets that he told at the end, all the things that he had learned and was very wary of sharing with people. God bless.